They thought he was just another traveler they could humiliate, another man in a tailored suit who didn't look like he belonged in first class. So they handcuffed him in front of hundreds of passengers without realizing they were arresting the head of the nation's entire security intelligence network, a mistake that would detonate their careers before the night was over. It was a crowded Thursday evening at Stonebridge International Airport in Dallas, the kind of controlled chaos where rolling suitcases echoed across marble floors, boarding announcements overlapped in polished voices, and travelers moved in restless currents beneath glowing departure boards flickering between green and red. At Gate C-17, Flight 442 to Washington, D.C. was preparing for priority boarding, and the first-class line was beginning to form with the usual mix of executives, politicians, and affluent regulars accustomed to early access and quiet luxury. Standing near the front was Dr. Marcus Ellington, a composed man in his early 50s with close-cropped hair, calm eyes, and the understated presence of someone used to high-pressure rooms. He wore a navy suit cut to precision, a crisp white shirt without a single wrinkle, and polished black shoes that reflected the terminal lights. A slim black briefcase rested beside his carry-on, and in his hand was a secure tablet he occasionally glanced at, reviewing briefing notes before his return to Washington. He traveled without visible security, without assistance, without the spectacle that usually followed men in positions of authority, because privacy was part of his discipline. To most eyes, he appeared to be just another well-dressed professional. But not to everyone. A few feet behind him stood Claudia Whitmore, a wealthy real estate investor known locally for her charity galas and sharp tom, dressed head to toe in designer labels, diamonds shimmering against her silk blouse. Oversized sunglasses perched dramatically atop perfectly styled blonde hair. She had been impatient from the moment she arrived at the gate, sighing loudly, checking her gold watch every few seconds, and casting judgmental glances at anyone she deemed unworthy of standing near her. When her gaze settled on Marcus, it lingered. Her lips tightened. In her narrow worldview, a black man standing confidently at the front of a first-class line did not compute. She leaned toward the young gate agent and spoke just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Are you sure everyone in this line actually belongs here?" The agent blinked, confused. "Yes, ma'am. These are priority passengers." Claudia tilted her chin toward Marcus. "Him too?" The agent nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am." But that answer didn't satisfy her. Claudia's eyes hardened. "He's been watching my bag," she muttered theatrically. "I don't feel comfortable." There had been no such behavior. Marcus had not so much as glanced in her direction. He remained focused on his screen, composed, unaware that he was being quietly accused of something fabricated entirely out of prejudice. Not content with planting doubt at the desk, Claudia spotted 2 airport police officers patrolling nearby and waved them over with urgent gestures. Officer Trent Lawson, tall and broad-shouldered with a permanent scowl etched into his face, approached first, followed by Officer Kyle Mercer, younger, leaner, and eager in a way that suggested he enjoyed confrontation. "Officers," Claudia began dramatically, lowering her voice as if sharing sensitive intelligence. "That man over there has been staring at my belongings. I feel unsafe boarding a plane with him. He looks suspicious." The word hung heavy, intentionally vague yet loaded with implication. Lawson's eyes immediately shifted to Marcus. He did not ask for clarification. He did not review footage. He did not question the motive. He simply saw a well-dressed white woman claiming discomfort and a black man standing calmly in line. That was enough for him. The officers strode forward with deliberate authority, their boots striking the floor with intimidating rhythm. Conversations around them quieted as passengers sensed tension rising. "Sir," Lawson said sharply, "step out of the line." Marcus looked up slowly, his expression neutral but attentive. "Is there a problem, officer?" "We've received a complaint," Mercer added, already placing his hand near his utility belt. "You need to come with us." Marcus glanced briefly at Claudia, who now stood with folded arms and a faint smile of satisfaction. Understanding dawned instantly. Still, he complied. He stepped out of line calmly, maintaining composure despite the dozens of eyes now watching. "What exactly is the accusation?" he asked evenly. "Suspicious behavior," Lawson replied. "Show us her ID and boarding pass." Marcus handed over both without hesitation. "First-class ticket." Government-issued identification. Everything valid. Lawson examined the documents longer than necessary, then looked Marcus up and down slowly. First class, he muttered. Mercer smirked openly. That's not cheap. The implication was unmistakable. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. Are we verifying a complaint or questioning my financial status? Mercer stepped closer. You're asking too many questions. I'm asking for clarification, Marcus replied. If there is evidence of wrongdoing, state it. Otherwise, return my documents. The firmness in his tone irritated Lawson. He was used to compliance laced with fear, not calm insistence on rights. Your attitude isn't helping, Lawson snapped. You're being uncooperative. I have complied with every request, Marcus said. I will not accept insinuations rooted in bias. A small crowd had gathered now, phones subtly lifting, whispers spreading. Claudia's expression grew smugger by the second. Lawson's pride flared under the scrutiny. That's it, he barked. You're disturbing the peace and interfering with a security investigation. Before Marcus could respond, Mercer grabbed his arm. Turn around. The movement was abrupt and forceful. Marcus did not resist physically, knowing escalation would only worsen the situation. You are making a serious error, he warned quietly. You're under arrest, Lawson declared loudly, ensuring the surrounding passengers heard every word. Gasps rippled through the gate area. Mercer twisted Marcus's arms behind his back. The metallic snap of handcuffs echoed sharply in the terminal air, louder than any boarding announcement. The cold steel clamped around his wrists as cameras discreetly recorded from multiple angles. A dignified man in a tailored suit, accused without evidence, was marched away like a criminal under the watchful eyes of strangers. Claudia Whitmore exhaled with satisfaction, adjusting her handbag as though a problem had been removed. She believed she had restored order to her world. But as Officer Lawson shoved Marcus forward toward the airport police station, neither he nor Mercer had the slightest understanding of the magnitude of the man they had just placed in handcuffs, a mistake that would soon bring the entire terminal to a standstill. The moment his name was verified in the system, the confidence drained from the room like air from a punctured tank, because the man they had dragged in wearing handcuffs was not just another passenger, not just a businessman with a first-class ticket, but the director of the National Security Intelligence Agency, a position powerful enough to shake entire departments with a single call. Inside the small airport police substation, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Officer Trent Lawson and Officer Kyle Mercer stood beside the booking desk, still believing they had handled a routine disturbance. Dr. Marcus Ellington sat upright in the hard plastic chair, wrists cuffed behind his back, suit slightly creased but posture perfectly straight. A desk sergeant began the intake process, typing slowly. Full name: Dr. Marcus Ellington. Occupation: Marcus lifted his chin slightly. His voice was calm, controlled, unmistakably authoritative. Director of the National Security Intelligence Agency. The keyboard stopped clicking. Lawson scoffed lightly at first. Yeah, okay. But Marcus didn't blink. My credentials are in my inside jacket pocket. The sergeant hesitated, then retrieved the identification wallet and opened it. His face changed instantly. The federal seal, the clearance level, the embedded authentication markings, all unmistakable. He quickly began verification through the secure terminal. Within seconds, confirmation flashed across the screen. Active status. High-level clearance. Federal protection designation. The room went silent. Mercer stepped back first. This has to be some kind of mistake. The sergeant swallowed. It's not. Lawson grabbed the credentials, scanning them again, his earlier arrogance dissolving into disbelief. The title alone was staggering. The director oversaw national counterterrorism intelligence, interagency security operations, and direct briefings to the president. They had publicly handcuffed a man protected at the highest federal level. Marcus's voice broke the silence. Remove the cuffs. The command was simple, but there was no mistaking its authority. The sergeant fumbled for the key, hands shaking as he unlocked the metal restraints. Red marks circled Marcus's wrists as he stood slowly, adjusting his sleeves with controlled dignity. Mercer's voice trembled. Sir, we were responding to a complaint. You responded to bias, Marcus replied evenly. Without evidence. Lawson's breathing grew shallow. We didn't know who you were. Marcus met his eyes steadily. You didn't need to. That sentence hit harder than any accusation. The implication was clear. Rights do not depend on status. The sergeant was already reaching for the phone. "Call your chief," Marcus instructed calmly, "and notify the Department of Justice and Homeland Security oversight." Immediately. There was no hesitation now. The tone in the room had completely reversed. Within minutes, calls began spreading beyond the airport. Senior officers were alerted. Federal contacts were notified. What had started as a gateside accusation was turning into a full-scale federal incident. Lawson felt his badge grow heavier against his chest. He imagined internal affairs, body camera reviews, civil rights violations under color of law. Mercer wiped sweat from his forehead, replaying every word he had said at the gate. The insinuations, the mocking tone, the unnecessary escalation. "Sir," Mercer said quietly, voice cracking, "we never meant for this to go that far." Marcus looked at him without anger, without shouting, just cold clarity. "You chose escalation." Footsteps approached rapidly from the hallway outside as senior officials began arriving sooner than anyone expected. The tension in the room thickened. The officers who had once stood tall in uniform now avoided eye contact. The man they had marched through the terminal as a criminal now stood free, composed, and fully in command of the situation. And in that suffocating silence, Lawson and Mercer understood something irreversible. This was no longer an airport arrest. It was the beginning of the end of their careers. By the time the airport police chief stormed into the substation, flanked by senior supervisors and federal agents, the outcome was already sealed. The body camera footage had been secured, the gate surveillance pulled, and the initial review left no room for interpretation. What happened at Gate C-17 was not a misunderstanding. It was racial profiling, unlawful detention, and abuse of authority carried out in full public view. Officer Trent Lawson and Officer Kyle Mercer stood off to the side, pale and silent, as Dr. Marcus Ellington calmly recounted the incident from beginning to end. The fabricated accusation, the insinuations about his ticket, the public humiliation of being handcuffed without cause. There was no exaggeration in his voice, no emotional outburst, just facts. And the facts were devastating. Within the hour, both officers were relieved of duty on the spot. Their badges, weapons, and credentials were confiscated pending a full internal affairs and federal civil rights investigation. Claudia Whitmore was located before departure and detained for filing a false report. Under questioning, her confidence dissolved as footage contradicted every claim she made. The Department of Justice formally opened a case reviewing violations under color of law, and Homeland Security Oversight initiated its own inquiry into procedural failures. In the days that followed, Lawson and Mercer attempted apologies, their voices no longer authoritative but desperate. They spoke of families, of careers, of mistakes made in the heat of the moment. But Dr. Ellington's response remained steady and measured. "Authority without accountability," he told them, "is the true threat to security." Weeks later, the investigation concluded with damning clarity. Both officers were terminated permanently and charged federally for civil rights violations and unlawful detention. Facing overwhelming evidence, they were convicted and sentenced to prison, their careers ending in disgrace. Whitmore accepted a plea agreement that included heavy financial penalties and a public admission of filing a false complaint. Stonebridge International Airport implemented mandatory bias training and revised detention protocols under federal supervision. As for Dr. Marcus Ellington, he returned quietly to Washington, resuming his national security briefings as if the chaos had been a brief interruption rather than a public scandal. The humiliation he endured did not weaken him. It strengthened his resolve to enforce oversight where power had grown careless. The officers had begged for forgiveness once they realized who he was. But by then, the damage was done. Because justice does not depend on titles, and when authority is abused, it answers to something higher than fear.